Hello, my name is Bonnie Bowwell, and I want to talk to you today about you, a rock, the world. It's about the infinite capacity of each of our lives and the fact that each of us is inseparable from one another. There was a scholar who lived in Japan in the 13th century who said, "A rock that has been at the bottom of the ocean can create fire. If such ordinary things of this world are such wonders, how much more powerful is one human life?" This is an interesting idea when you think about it, because we know that despite this tremendous capacity that we have as human beings, we find ourselves involved in war, endless poverty, and of course problems in our own life. And of course, there's no shortage of people to blame: our husband, our boss, and of course the other political party. So how do we reconcile these differences? How do we become that which we know we can be? This is where I think our topic, redefining relevance, comes in. Because relevance is usually defined as that which lies in front of us, something that's on our doorstep. So that when we lose our job, of course, that's relevant. But if the school down the street doesn't have enough books, somehow that's less relevant to us. But we must expand our definition of relevance to include others. Scientists tell us that we are 99.9% like each other in terms of our gene pool. That's just on the biological level. On the social level, we know that the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the cars we drive, all have another person's hand in it. We are interconnected. And this interconnectedness is synergistic. So my favorite example for this is the water molecule, H2O. Because when that hydrogen molecule moves, the oxygen molecule moves too. It must. And so I've seen in my own life that if I change myself, then I can change my environment. I've seen this firsthand at my work. I was working in Los Angeles as a TV reporter for Channel 4 News during the Columbine massacre. And like most of us, I was horrified by the slaughtering of these innocent high school students. But what began to disturb me also was that many in the media began to really focus on the adolescents, where I began to think what we really need to focus on was the violence that was in our culture and how we could interrupt this cycle of violence. So I decided we needed to have an hour-long program called Seeds of Peace to talk about how to break the cycle. But in order to do this, I had to find allies within my own news department, which was tricky, because even within that news department, I found that I had a conflict with my boss. My boss was a screamer, and in many news departments, screaming goes on, but I found that to be really uncomfortable. And so I began to separate myself from my boss. So I decided if I was going to succeed, I had to overcome my own negativity first. So I made up my mind that this was going to be my new best friend. And as I began to change my attitude about this person, little by little over the next few months, he did become my new best friend. He was the one who said, "Let her do this." And because of that, we were able to do an hour show called Seeds of Peace. It went on in 6 major markets on NBC and won a Golden Mike Award. I am convinced that unless I had changed my definition of relevance to include my boss, I would not have been nearly so successful. I've also learned from my family about this idea of respecting others. My grandfather was a man named Whitney Young. He lived in Kentucky during the segregated times. And of course, because of the difficulty of those times, he had to come up with mottos to encourage himself, to keep his equilibrium. One of my favorite family stories is about my uncle, Whitney Young, Jr. One day, my uncle had returned from a basketball game being very victorious, and his team wanted to celebrate naturally. So they went into a local diner, and the proprietor of the diner said, "No, you boys have to go eat in back." Well, my uncle was so furious that he went to his father and said, "You know, Dad, this is ridiculous, this is terrible," and he started berating the man who had put them out. And my grandfather looked at him and said, "Son," he said, "never, never let another person drag you so low as to hate them." So Uncle Whitney, I think, was able to take that lesson forward in his life. And later, when he became a sergeant in the Army during World War II, and those armies were segregated then, the blacks on one side and the whites on the other, there was a lot of tension between the enlisted officers and the men. And so my uncle was able to mediate between the two. And later, this role of becoming a mediator played well for him. He became the head of the National Urban League during the height of the Civil Rights Movement and was able to be the person to mediate differences between rich and poor, black and white. He was trusted by 3 presidents. And so I really felt compelled to tell this story, and I was able to tell it in a PBS documentary that I just completed called The Power Broker, Whitney Young's Fight for Civil Rights, because I wanted to show how we can all become bridge builders. You know, but bridge building is one thing. The fact of the matter is we have to remember that there are people who really seek to divide and conquer, and they work against our best interests. So in the American South, for example, you had poor white people who could not vote, but their attention was directed toward poor African Americans under the umbrella of organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. And so they were moving against their best interests. And we can see in our national discourse today how this pattern continues, where people vote against their own best interests. And now, interestingly, we find that poor whites actually have their life expectancy decreasing. So the question is for us, should we wait for politicians to change? I don't think so, because they won't. I really think that it is up to us, the people, to decide that we must become the bridge builders. We are the ones who will make the change. We have to be the agents who understand that our life is as powerful as the rock that can create fire. But we're different, we're better, because we can decide at any time that all people are relevant to us. We can expand our compassion. This is something we must do. We must do it now. We are the people. This is the time. It is you, a rock, the world. Thank you.